All right, if you're just joining us, again, welcome to Monitoring Apache Kafka JMX Metrics with Logz.io. A couple of housekeeping items before we get going. So you're going to receive a recording of this webinar after it's done. So no worries if you have to go out for a coffee break. Secondly, make sure to add any questions you have in the question or the chat box, and we'll address those questions at the end of the presentation. So today we have Noni Peri, who runs production for Logz.io. He's going to present this webinar. Noni, take it away.
Thanks, Charlie. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good these days. I know it's not the same. Personally, I'm doing this from the comfort of my own home, but with the discomfort of having kids here as well. So excuse that if you hear something breaking. Let's get going. My name is Noni. I run production, as Charlie said, for Logz.io. Before that, I was a DevOps team lead, and I like Apache Kafka. And that's why we're going to see how we can monitor it, or at least its metrics, using Logz.io today. I want to go over in the next few slides before the actual demo with the why is it so challenging to monitor Kafka. Then take a look at how we examine the JMX metrics that Kafka exposes. In the demo, I'll show a little bit of shipping, how to get that those telemetry data out to your Logz.io metrics account, and also just a tip of the iceberg of how to build a visualization, a useful one, with some more tips on expanding your dashboard, and obviously there will be time for QA. So Kafka is very useful. I'm sure you're here because you either know it and use it, or wanna use it. But the visibility into its operational parameters is not that good. In part because it just exposes so much data on a single broker with a very small workload. It exposes well over 30,000 different metrics, different data points that you can look at. This difficulty is aggravated by the fact that all of these things are not that well documented. You can find online some information about what to look at and whatnot, but nothing really covers everything, and it's not as intuitive as you might expect. And looking afterwards, once you even know what you want to look at, trying to extract useful information is really like looking for a needle in a haystack. So not that easy. I am going to be showing only open source tools, and in that I include Logz.io, which is open source based. And this is the actual stack that we will be using to get some infrastructure monitoring going on our Kafka cluster. So on the left-hand side, we have the Kafka process. That's a Java process running on the JVM, uses JMX. I use Jolokia, which is a JMX to HTTP bridge, to expose those JMX metrics to a more usable format, an HTTP-based format. I'll say a few words about this in the next slide. And then I ship those metrics that are exposed using that HTTP endpoint from Jolokia to an account I created at Logz.io, which uses Elasticsearch as a backend and a Grafana frontend to visualize those metrics that are of interest. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jolokia, Jolokia is a very lightweight Java agent that you have several ways of running it. You can run it as part of the class path of your main Java process. You can attach it to a running Java process. There's a way to do that. And in essence, it provides an HTTP input. You can then use curl, you can automate around it. And that's why it's really useful for us here at Logz.io for our own purposes, because we've been looking at JMX metrics of various other services for a very long time now, in the distant past, mostly to querying those HTTP endpoints that your local exposes. And now we can augment that into our infrastructure monitoring solution, which is really, really neat. If you're unfamiliar with any of the other tools I mentioned in the stack, feel free to ask questions about that in the Q&A. Under the hood, I know there's a lot of words here, but this is a little bit of the secret sauce that we can provide with Logz.io for Kafka. This is a list of the types and the names of the actual metrics that we found, at least, most useful for us. And we've already pre-built a filtering mechanism in Logz.io that will make sense of those, as I mentioned, well over 30,000 different metric points, just to vet out the ones that are most important. Let's take a look at the demo. Yesterday I created this demo account. This is the main page that you will see once you have it running and shipped some metrics to it at least. But first, before I go to this specific demo, I want to show you the documentation of how to ship your data. This includes obviously logging and security and other stuff, but what's interesting for us for this webinar is the metrics section, and specifically the JMX, how to ship your data page. There's instructions here for downloading a JMX to Logz.io. You can download either a jar or a container that contains that jar. There's multiple ways to run it. I encourage you to take a look here. And this is what I'll be using. There's also information on how to configure it, what fields you can add, and I want to also give some recommendations of what you should add. This is an instance. It's a Kafka broker running not in a container. The Kafka broker is a Java process running on the host. I want to show you the configuration of that JMX shipper that I'm going to be using through this webinar, and a few important points here. Service name Kafka. You need, if you do intend to use this and want to benefit from the filtering that we pre-make and the rollup that we do specifically for Kafka, you should keep these the same. Host is the host name that I'm using, and then some information about how to get the data, how often to pull, whitelist and blacklist, regex, and the Jolokia URL. This IP address that you see here, that's this own specific server. Obviously, you can run this remote. It's an HTTP endpoint. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to be running it locally. Now, the second part is shipping information. This is listener address. This is my own account shipping token, and some other operating parameters for the shipper itself. Not that interesting at this point. Extra dimensions, however, is an important section. This is where I augment the metrics I'm shipping from this instance with some additional knowledge, some metadata that makes more sense operationally once this telemetry data is in my account and I want to visualize it. Because I have multiple environments, you probably do too as well, staging, prod, pre-prod, a whole bunch of them. Maybe you have different clusters in different regions or different availability zones. Obviously, the broker ID is an important bit of information that I want to be able to use later on when visualizing stuff. And cluster ID, again, this is an internal notation. We have multiple clusters. This broker is part of cluster whose ID is 3. And this is all important data for me to ship with the data points that I'm going to be shipping. I will later be able to query this and use this to filter out the visualizations. So remember this section. We're going to touch up on it in a minute. And on this second screen, I don't know if this is big enough. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm running this command. This is a Docker container sorry, this one. It's the same one as the JMX Logzio, but an internal flavor, same functionality. I'm giving it the application conf file that you saw here as the only input that it will need to use. And then it started, once I run this, it started shipping the data. The reason I'm using a file on the file system for configuration and then a container is because it lends itself to the way we do configuration management here. But obviously you can preload your configuration file with the shipper or any other method you want to provide different configuration for different shipper on a different broker, which is what essentially you will want to be doing. Excuse me. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so that's the shipping part. Let's now get a new dashboard going, create a dashboard. Now, I don't think I will have time to create much, but I will give you a few hints and I will show you the important bits. When you go to create a new dashboard, you can start either with a query or a visualization. What I like to do, and this is just a personal preference, is start with the variables. Variables are, if you don't know, the feature of Grafana. And essentially, I want to take these extra dimensions that I'm shipping and turn them into variables so that in the end, I will have one dashboard to look at all of my infrastructure, but I will have drop-down selections at the top that I can filter and see, well, show me only environment staging, or show me only region this or that, or only cluster 3 brokers in region EU Central 1 or EU East 1, whatever the region is. So that's where this comes in to use. And I want to create the variables. So first variable would be a region. For data source, there's only one that's interesting. If I don't explain a specific dropdown, feel free to ask me later. But I try to talk about the more important ones. Now, what you see here is an Elasticsearch query that will look at my my account and try to figure out what are possible values for this. And you can see on the bottom, once I enter this and switch windows, I have a preview values. It found at least this value. So I'm happy with that, and I'm going to add that variable. There's a few other variables, sorry, that are interesting for me. The next one would be AZ, availability zone. Just the display, data source 1 on dashboard. Okay, now for some of these, I will want to include an all option so that I can select just one region or all regions. Again, what makes sense to your environment is what you will want to be doing. Now, because I don't want to be limiting myself to prod, I'm going to cut that out and see that I have the option for ID. Maybe I want to look at multiple values at the same time. Two more to go. Broker. This is where I'll be putting my broker ID. Now, if you take a moment to notice, once you set up a variable, you can reference that variable in other variables. And in that way, what you can achieve is the usability of, for example, selecting a region and then having the different values that populate the drop-down box of the cluster IDs only show values that are relevant for that region. So the filtering values change in relation to other filters that you set, which is, I think, kind of useful. And that's the broker that I have. This is all, it's getting these preview values using the actual data that I'm shipping from this one broker. And lastly, because sound visualization makes more sense when you filter on a specific topic, looking at topic. By the way, if anybody has questions that are not directly related to the JMX of Kafka, but more general about Kafka or about Logz.io, also feel free to ask those. Again, dependency on the cluster that I just defined in the previous variable, and AZ again. And here you can see that as a preview, it's showing me possible values for the topic that is found. If I make a query here that doesn't make sense, doesn't return any values, the preview values section here will be empty. You can kind of verify your work as you're going along. Okay, now that I have my variable set up, I can save this. Okay, and you can see that already I have here in the top down the drop downs that I mentioned. So I'll quickly take a look at them, make sure that I have everything here and all here. Okay, now let's add a panel and let's add a visualization. I want to start, for the sake of this demo, with a bytes in per second visualization. I think that's very useful. I will be showing you how to query the data and get it into the tool, but I'm not going to go into the various display options. Some people want it stacked, some others prefer overlapping. I prefer both because sometimes you can see anomalies or important information in either one of them. So I'm going to have a query here that I'm going to be adding. Then I'm going to be selecting the specific metric I want to show, and then some grouping. So let's just expand this, like that. Okay, my query looks like this. Let's take a look at this. So it's going to select the service. It's going to match only on the brokers that are part of the pull down here of broker. That's the variable name that I set for broker. And only those that are domain name Kafka service, that's part of the metric that I want to show here. The type is broker topic metrics, and the name is bytes in per second. And specifically, I also want to be able to look at one or more or all topics. So I'm going to be limiting the query, and I'm going to be anchoring it to the topic that's selected here at the top. Now, what I am interested specifically here is the max of 1 minute rate. Okay. Now, I wanted this to be by the service host, so by host name, sorry, again. Size, I don't want to limit the number of results. Okay, Okay, and then by terms topic, I'm going to be looking for the topic. Again, open it. And then by date, histogram, and then above 1 minute. Oh, nope, you know what, let's leave it another. Okay. This is already starting to make some sense, and you can see that the hover works, and I can see my various topics, and I'm kind of happy with this. Let's look at the last hour. Yeah, not so happy like that. This is a small instance. I need to figure out what I would do now is figure out the rate I'm shipping and the rate this account is set up for. But in essence, the output should look something like this. Again, I'm not going to go into specifically all the visualization options that you can add here. How to display this? Do you want the legend or not? But this is how I would build this visualization. Now, didn't take that long. Once the variables are set, these are reusable for additional panels. You want to save this, and you're good to go. This is a little bit of maybe hints about what I find most useful to look at when I look at my Kafka clusters metrics. The bytes in per second, the bytes out, messages in per second. For these three metrics, I put here at the top, you can see that they all include filtering by AZ, by Kafka cluster and topic, and then the exact type and metric name that I'm going to be looking at. But what I want to mention for these top three that you see here is that I built several different visualizations using the same data. For example, one visualization is choosing only to show me only the ones that had a maximum value in the last few minutes. In another visualization, I want to show the maximum of average over the time period of the dashboard, 1 hour, 6 hours, because I might want to see the peak that it had. Some of these are duplicated because one is stacked visualization and another one is not stacked. Again, each of these different variants of how to show the same data made sense in the past in various incidents that I had to look into. So that's why I'm duplicating or even triple adding them. The next two are very important to look at because they relate to capacity and network processor handler time. Network processor handler idle time and request handler idle time. These are very important to look at. Active controller count should be only one once you build that out. And under-replicated partitions is kind of a life story of anybody managing a Kafka cluster. It happens. You want to know exactly which brokers are reporting under-replicated partitions, so you can go fix them. And heap use, that's a Java metric that I find use in looking at. But this is basically what I get out of Kafka and a little bit of the Java to the side. And this is what I recommend as the bare minimum. My own dashboard has more, but at least this to get started. If you want to know more, I highly recommend our blog, not only about this, but other subjects as well. It's easy to open a free trial. In the Logzio Academy, you can find a lot of webinar content and other information. And obviously, there's a lot of documentation that we provide for this and other parts of our product. So I highly recommend using these links. And I'm open for questions.
Great, thank you, Noni. We have a couple good questions that came in. Feel free to add more in the chat box if you have any more. So the first one, I have multiple clusters with Kafka in them. Should I create a dashboard for each of them?
This is from my own experience and my own personal recommendation would be to create one dashboard and use a cluster identifier. We use a number for our own clusters. We reuse the numbers between regions. So I have several of these drop-down variables that you saw, one for region, one for cluster ID, but I do everything from the same dashboard. And if I want to zoom in on one specific cluster, I select it from the top, and then all the data within that dashboard will only show me that cluster.
Also, from the same person, how can I go see the specific errors coming from Kafka?
If you want to look at the errors coming from Kafka, what you should be doing is shipping the logs that Kafka emits into, sorry for the plug, into your Logz.io logging account. These things come hand in hand, and actually there's also a feature that to tie in the anomaly that you might be seeing in the infrastructure monitoring component, the Grafana front-end component. You can click that, you'll have a little icon, you can click that, it'll take you into the logging interface that's based on Kibana, with all the power that Kibana has in searching and drilling down, and all the added features that we provide on top of that. So actually that's a very good question, and I recommend you ship the logs as well, obviously, but that's maybe for another webinar.
Next question. We're using RabbitMQ. Does Logz.io support the same for RabbitMQ or not?
I have, unfortunately, I don't have experience with RabbitMQ. If it's Java-based, then you can use the exact same steps for shipping your JMX metrics out. Obviously, the names of the different telemetry variables will be different and relevant to RabbitMQ or whatever other Java application you're monitoring. But definitely, maybe I can add on this that you can incorporate in the same dashboard data from different sources. So the JMX to Logz.io would be one source, but maybe you have some other interesting metrics data being generated in correlation to that JMX data from Kafka. That could be either host related metrics like CPUs or disk usage, things of that nature. Maybe it would be a Kubernetes related metric. I don't know, depending on your setup and how you do things. But you can ship from multiple different types of sources. You can utilize everything within the same dashboard if it makes applicative and operational sense to you.
All right, next question is a bit long. If it's hard to understand over the call, then we can just email the answer. So the question is, I'm using JMX to Logz.io attached directly as a Java agent to my Kafka processes. This means I have to restart the processes if I need to change my whitelist parameter. How do I set things up to be able to change with metrics I ship without restarting the broker processes?
In order to achieve that, what you want to be doing is not running the JMX to Logz.io as an agent in the class path of your Java process, but rather using one of the other options, which is, let's just bring it up. You can still see my screen. You can use a JMX to Logz.io Docker container. Okay, and you only add the Jolokia agent into your Java process class path, and you don't have to restart that for anything because that exposes all of the JMX metrics that process has. And then if you need to change your configuration of your JMX to Logz.io, you do that in the configuration file and only restart the container of the JMX to Logz.io to apply the changes.
Great. And last one, Noni, can you set up an alert to notify me of Kafka Metrics spikes?
Yes, you can. Star, and the star is that the alerting feature will be GA in the infrastructure monitoring very soon. I don't know if it's days or so, and you will have a. If you look at this section here, what it will look like is when you work on your visualization, you have another round icon here with a bell on it, which when you click, it'll give you a wizard to set up your alerts, and you'll be able to mark what threshold you're interested in. If it crosses that, goes below or over, and you will then be able to tie that into an alert endpoint. I don't know if you know our product, but there's alert endpoints. You can send that as an image to Slack. You can email that. You can integrate with other third parties using HTTP hooks. So there's all different types of alerting endpoints that you can use. But yes, that will be coming, be generally available very soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Noni. And that's all the questions we have. So with that, we can conclude this webinar. You'll all be getting a recording of the webinar soon enough so that you can go back and look at parts again if you'd like. Thanks, everybody. And feel free to check out those next steps that Noni is sharing now. Have a great day and stay safe.